Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming. Thank you for braving the very weird weather we're having today. And I am also keenly aware there's a TED Talk going on beneath our feet. My name is Sean Kramer. I'm the Andrew W. Mellon Postdoctoral Curatorial Fellow at the Bowdoin College Museum of Art. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the talk, Ingenuity and Risk, a conversation with Anthony Viti and me. A bit about Anthony. He lives and works in Brooklyn, New York. His experience as an activist and educator deeply informs his artistic practice. He has also facilitated monthly visual thinking groups developed for a mental health program that serves lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, in addition to teaching art history at the School of Visual Arts to international students and in the first-year program at Parsons New School for Design. Viti's art practice has focused on narratives of body and HIV and resulting sexual subcultures. He uses a variety of media, painting, sculpture, video, and installation that is both confrontational and high-spirited. He's received grants from the Pollock Krasner Foundation, Art Matters, and twice has been a fellow at the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown. His work is in the collections of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Leslie Lohman Museum of Art, the Cleve Carney Museum of Art, and the Bowdoin College Museum of Art. He holds a BFA from SUNY Purchase and an MFA from Rutgers University. And so his work that is featured in the exhibition Irreplaceable You, Personhood and Dignity, 1980s to Now, is called INR number 42 plus 43 from the year 2003. The exhibition in which this is featured will be on view until June 1st at the Bowdoin College Museum of Art. So if casually viewing these two stunning abstract non-figural paintings, which are situated so their edges touch, we might be surprised to discover that blood and urine, material traces of the artist's own body, are mingling with oil and pigment on the surfaces of the two canvases. This diptych forms part of a series, Ingenuity and Risk, and it impels us as viewers to contemplate the cultural, historical, and deeply political implications of bodily fluids and fluid exchange. But it also positions the enterprise of abstract painting at the intersections of health and justice, mourning and protest. I noticed when standing in front of the work, one can't help but be reminded of the presence of the artist, even though he has chosen not to depict himself literally or visually. But I think that we are all here to hear more from Anthony about his work. And so with that, I want to welcome Anthony and just say this, we really intend this to be a conversation. So he and I will have a conversation for about 30 or 40 minutes or so, and then we'd like to open it up to you all for a conversation. So let me welcome Anthony Viti.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I have, some questions to get us started,
Okay.
Of course. So just as a way to get started, I thought I might ask you how you got started, and sort of how you came about making the work that you have made.
How I got started as being an artist?
Yeah.
Making work has always been a really important part of my life, from childhood to the present. And it's really been a mode of survival. And I could never imagine doing anything else. It was what I really wanted to do.
Amazing. And what are some of so we're looking at the one that is in the exhibition, but I know that you have some other images of other works that you've made in series. Would you want to just kind of walk us through some of the other works?
This is where I feel like my work has become mature. I had been deeply involved with ACT UP in the first couple of years, and have been looking at Marsden Hartley since I was a college student. And part Portrait of a German Officer started to really resonate with me in the context of the AIDS epidemic, where we were living with constant loss, incessant life threat, with an uncertainty of the future. And so I identified with what Marsden was doing here in using this military imagery, which is also reflecting a relationship that he had with a man named Karl von Freyberg, which is pictured, his initials are pictured here. And there are other elements of his biography, his age, and then the number of his regiment. And I've read different things about the meaning of this E. I read that in one biography that he was referencing Queen Elizabeth of Greece, which I still am trying to figure out why. But then I also read that this represents his given first name, Edmund. Marsden came from a broken family. His mother died when he was quite young. His father remarries, and as a way to kind of bring the family back together or to heal things in the family, he takes his father's wife's last name as his first. So then he becomes Marsden Hartley.
So then, and this is over by you on the right,
Yes.
where you are taking a particular sort of iconographic element from Hartley's work here. And I was just kind of curious, so what, sort of as an artist, when did you start sort of looking seriously at Hartley, and when did you kind of decide that the figure of the Iron Cross that's at the apex of Hartley's painting was something that you were interested in as an image, as an artist?
Well, I was trying to, let's go back.
Oh,
that did the wrong thing. Oh yeah, right, we have to use
I know.
Which image are you?
Yeah, that one? Yeah.
So early on, I was trying to use abstraction as a way to represent loss. And I entitled these somatic, and I also numbered them. And I wanted to bring the idea of the experience of AIDS and war, and the experience of AIDS in particular, more in the forefront. And so I then started to make these small elegiac pieces. They're 11 inches square, and referencing the Iron Cross that's featured in Marsden Hartley's Portrait of a German Officer. Karl von Freyberg was awarded this Medal of Honor posthumously. And so I represented that in a way to draw a relationship between the experience with AIDS and war.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting because from what I know of Marsden Hartley's and painting Portrait of a German Officer, and what you have already kind of told us about it, is that he is using these different kinds of symbols. There's the flags of Bavaria and Prussia, the Iron Cross, the kind of tassels of a uniform. So he's using these various symbols and kind of smashing them together to get a sense of the the person of Karl von Freyberg. And so did you have any, is there any sort of, what am I trying to ask, kind of personal connection that you had to the form of the Iron Cross at all? Or was it sort of, I guess that's...
Not to the cross specifically, other than my relationship to Portrait of a German Officer. But there are references, personal references. The 420-4775 was a lover's phone number.
Oh, wow.
And I learned that he died by calling him. People, you would see somebody at an ACT UP meeting one week, and the next week they were gone.
Wow. Would you, as a kind of, segue back to, sort of that history, would you want to tell us just how you got involved with ACT UP and then with Grand Fury? Just kind of lead us through that story, because it's pretty fascinating and really meaningful, I think, to have someone here who was, living in that history.
I was living across the street from the LGBTQ community center on 13th Street. I had this odd job where I was assisting this man with a neuromuscular disease who was rendered quadriplegic, and he was in a wheelchair. And I was walking down the street, and I see this large banner, Larry Kramer Speaks Tonight, and I didn't know who he was. And he was a playwright, activist, writer, and I went into the community center and I asked them, who is Larry Kramer? And they looked at me like I was from Mars and said, what? And although I couldn't go to that meeting, but I started to go shortly thereafter. And it was then that we started to organize demonstrations. There was only a small group of us, about 30 people. But it was through Larry's talk. Often people refer to the origins of ACT UP as something that Larry begun, but he did not begin it. It was a community response to his talk. And at one point, he asks a third of the people in the audience to stand up and says, "You are all going to die." And then he looks at the other 2/3 and asks, what are we going to do? How are we going to respond to this? And the way things segued into Grand Fury was Bill Olander from the New Museum came and invited ACT UP to do a window project. And
okay, yeah, there we go. Technology, figure this out. Now where's the mouse?
Do I have this?
So you're talking about Bill Olander at the museum? Yeah.
And I lost my notes about the quotes. But in the bottom, there are these horrific quotes. There's Jesse Helms. I'm totally forgetting this journalist's name.
William Buck.
Yes, thank you. And thank you. And Ronald Reagan, who didn't say one goddamn word until 1987 about AIDS. And Buckley has this really incendiary comment about gay people, like now we have a reason to really hate them. And so it was atrocious, the things that were being said. And perhaps maybe we can go to the video.
Oh, yeah.
And put the closed caption.
Okay. Now I don't know where the mouse went.
So what we're about to show is a recording from a press conference from Reagan's White House. And this is, I think, the summer of 1982. There we go, the volume.
Yeah.
Over a third of them it's known as gay plague. No, it is. I mean, it's a pretty serious thing. It's one in every 3 people that get this have died. And I wonder precisely where.
I don't have it, or you? Do you?
You don't have it. Well, I'm relieved to hear that.
Do you? You didn't answer my question. How do you know?
The president, in other words, the White House looks on this as a great joke.
No, I don't know anything about it, then. What do
The
we?
president, does anybody in the White House know about this epidemic?
I don't think so. I don't think there's been no personal experience here, Lester.
I'm just, I thought you.
Doctor, I checked thoroughly with Dr. Rudy this morning, and he's had no patients suffered from AIDS or
The
whatever it is.
president doesn't have gay plague. Is that what you're saying?
No, didn't say that.
Didn't say it.
I thought I heard you on the State Department over there. When you still there?
Because I love you, Larry.
Oh, I see. Let's go put it in those terms, Lester.
So it was a fucking joke, all these people dying. I mean, they didn't give a shit. And Lester is also known as a huge homophobe to the journalist. And so that's what we were entering. There was no real medical support, no support from from politicians, only ourselves. And ACT UP had a huge impact, particularly on treatment. there was the only treatment that was available was AZT, and which was incredibly poisonous, and they had to take it every 4 hours. And it's really through the treatment and data group who really pushed the CDC and other health organizations in the United States to conduct these studies and also to allow for compassionate access to the drugs. And Tony Fauci was really influential in this. He actually came to ACT UP meetings, spoke with people from treatment and data, and it's their relationship with Tony Fauci that we started to see some headway.
Can we go back to this slide for a second? And you were talking kind of the background of these two images, but would you want to tell us a bit about what's going on in both of them as they keep flipping?
So this is the first anniversary of ACT UP, where we were demonstrating down on Wall Street. And we really fucked with the police, and where we all broke up into these different affinity groups. And then one would travel to another part of the neighborhood, and the police were running around like crazy. And it was really satisfying. And here is a friend of mine, Lauren McAlpin, myself, Mark Orajema, and his partner, Stephen Gendon, who dies in 2009. And this is me just being an angry faggot and resisting arrest. Yeah. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I think my next question was just kind of going back to sort of how do those experiences and that history kind of then inform sort of works like these, or, you know, if there were other ones that were sort of more closely related, if you wanted to talk about these or the other works you had pulled up.
My work has never directly reflected my AIDS activism. Matter of fact, can we go back to Grand Fury?
Oh, yeah. This one?
Yeah. Perfect. And the closest I came to working visually and addressing AIDS activism was my work with Grand Fury, who made this project, Let the Record Show. And actually, it wasn't Grand Fury yet, but after we made that project, we decided to continue working together. And this was our first project, AIDS 1 in 61. And I don't really identify working with them. Part of the discussions that we had early on were that we were going to discuss about collaborating with community-based organizations. And so I took that seriously. And I started to go to the Brooklyn AIDS Task Force meetings, just as a way to hear what their concerns were, hear what they were doing. I would help set up tables, that kind of stuff, just to get to know them. And I established a relationship with the then education director, Yannick Durand. And she really encouraged me to go into HIV education. And so I did. I got a job at the New York City Department of Health AIDS hotline, where I counseled people on the hotline, crisis intervention, education, and prevention. And a little history about this poster. The director said, Jesus, all the ads that we have are crap. And I wish we had something. I wish we had like a Keith Haring image. And I was like, well, that's going to be really easy to do. And because Keith is really generous. And so I gave the contact information to the director for Keith's gallery. And within days, we had this drawing.
I think that your work as an educator is a good kind of segue into a slide like this. Do you want to kind of tell us a bit kind of like what we're looking at here and how these ideas of active listening, empathy, et cetera, inform your work as an educator?
So a lot of our time at the hotline, we're developing skills of active listening, and where the listener is closely listening. And what is it like to listen? I'm asking you guys. What is it? What is it? What's the experience of listening? Uh-huh.
I love that you put this notion of active listening at the center, so that listening isn't simply something passive that we do, but that there is this relationship that develops between the listener and the speaker that maybe is expressed through eye contact or motion of the body. So I love that idea of combating the notion that listening is somehow a passive activity.
Yeah, it's really complicated. There's so much involved. And as you said, there's body language, so nonverbal cues is something that we would look for. Paraphrasing a contribution so that they can hear their own words, asking open-ended questions to keep it open, not just yes and no. And I want to go back to asking you all a question about listening. What is it like to listen?
Takes discipline.
How does it take discipline?
Because it's very hard to not jump in or take over or be judgmental.
Right.
Work on that.
Right. It's really hard to actually sit and listen because often people and myself have our heads, our brains are moving, and they're like, "Oh, how am I going to respond to that?" And you miss a lot. And what was the other that you brought our attention to?
Without judgment.
Yeah.
Oh, without judgment. Yes, absolutely. People would bring their own baggage. You would hear racist, homophobic, sexist comments, and you had to interact with people without judgment. And I do this too in education. There was one of the calls that I remember most was a woman who wanted to be tested for HIV antibody test. And she was insistent about it. And she was really resistant to speaking about it. And I kept her on the phone and I kept her asking questions. And she was getting at a certain point, she was getting kind of mad at me. But then at a certain point, she broke down and said that she was cleaning out her husband's desk, who died a year prior, and without these practices, I wouldn't have gotten that far with her. And it would have been really easy to judge her, like, "Why are you calling?" So it would have been really easy to judge. And what's really important in these situations is empathy. Trying to not understand, but just hear someone's anguish or their point of view.
Yeah, I was thinking too about our conversations of how sort of art then kind of enters this whole kind of matrix of listening, and sort of how art and education and thinking about empathy, lack of judgment, or just kind of hearing and engaging with people, how you have used art to do that.
During one of my residencies at the Fine Arts Source Center, I became really close with Philip Yenowin. He used to be the director of education at MoMA. And I would talk to him about how I brought these counseling skills into the studio and into the classroom. And he's like, introduced me to his work, visual thinking strategies. And one of the things I like about it is it seems kind of simplistic, but it offers this structure, not knowing that there's really structure there, to begin to talk about work. Often when I'm working with people feel like they need to understand something quickly or to respond quickly to a work. And so whenever I would work with students or with anybody in a museum, here, I ask people to examine. And what is it like to examine something? To then think about it and what is it like to think about it? What are we thinking about this object that is in front of us? And one of the things I get really excited about it is this can be practiced anywhere, in any situation, in any discipline. And then that we're going to contribute our ideas about what we thought about, and to listen, and then collectively build ideas about this thing that we're looking at. It's been really satisfying doing this work with this mental health program, many of which who don't feel like they have access to art. Oh, did I hit that?
I don't know.
Sorry. And didn't think art was for them. And one of my first sessions with them, one of the participants says, "Anthony, why are you doing this?" And I turned it back on to this person and said, "Well, what did we do today?" And they said that we looked at this interesting work, and I just never thought that I would have anything to say about this, and that I always thought that art was for people with deep pockets. And this is where I get really mad. Particularly the way the liberal arts are being erased. I really believe that in the liberal arts, and working this way develops language, critical thinking, and agency, the ability to think for yourself. And this is also a way in which I connect my work as an educator with activism. I believe that this is an activist endeavor.
Amazing. I think I do also want to come back to, a work like this, and sort of, we're so lucky to have you in the room with us now. And if you would just give us a sense of how, why this work of art looks the way it does, why you chose to make it the way you did, what does sort of, abstraction do for you? Just sort of like guide us through your thinking, which maybe has evolved over, the years about this painting.
Yes. So can we go back to the image of it hanging on General Ideas as wallpaper?
Oh, yeah. That one's a cool one.
Yeah. So this is how INR, what's it, 2242?
It's, what are you at?
The name of it?
42, 43.
43. Oh, Jesus. So I made them not thinking that necessarily they were a diptych. And in 2000, when did I make this?
2003.
In the a couple years before, despite protection, I seroconverted, and meaning I got infected with HIV, and it was rough, particularly being an educator and talking with people about protection and ways in which to have safer sex that doesn't include a penis, or other things to other ways in which to have an erotic experience. And that's where this title comes in, INR, which comes from a phrase that I read in a safer sex S&M pamphlet, speaking about how we needed our ingenuity and risk to develop a healthy, safer sex environment. And to go back to my own seroconversion, I never felt like my life was at risk at this point, because finally there was multiple therapies. And so HIV, this is where people probably here can explain it better than I can, but it's an RNA that turns into a DNA, and it's hard to treat it medically. And so with multiple therapies, we've got like multiple barriers, and so through these multiple barriers, they were able to control the replication of HIV.
But you are already kind of thinking about like fluids and fluid exchange well before that moment. So what then, how did that kind of become this for several years, the way that you were making paintings.
So in the first small iron cross that I showed you with Robert's phone number, the numbers were mixed to look like the color of dried blood. And one day I was working and I cut myself and I was like, oh, I've been spending all this time trying to make this paint look like the color of blood. And so I started to like try to essentially milk this cut. And our bodies are wonderful, and of course it clotted. And so I wasn't very successful. And then I was working in an HIV clinic doing pre and post-test counseling and crisis intervention, and I asked the phlebotomist there to draw my blood. And so that's how that started. And to go back here, and I was always have blood in my refrigerator. So when I seroconverted, I had this HIV negative blood in my refrigerator, and I was like, okay, what do I do with this? And it sat there for a long time, and I continued to have my blood drawn and to make work, and then I decided that I would make these two paintings, and I wasn't sure if they're going to be a diptych or not. And so one of them has HIV positive blood, and another has HIV negative blood. And the reason why, actually, before I started to use the blood in the beginning was to challenge people, to fuck with people, really. Because what I was hoping to do was to engage them in this abstraction and then have another level of interaction and narrative. And can I want to read this. Now, who wrote this? Because I thought it was great.
Oh, Julia Smart.
Hi. I really like how you wrote about Alfredo Yar's piece that it frustrates immediate consumption. That kicks ass. Thank you. And you say it so much better than I could. And so this is what some of my intentions were. A lot of people, like I'm thinking of Sam Gilliam, who also argues that abstraction can be political, in that he uses more polite words like mess you up. And then also James Little, an abstract artist, talks about abstraction not as a way to create something new, but he makes a connection between abstraction and democracy, that both are these kind of fluid experiments, and which I really appreciate. Oh, wait, can I say one more thing about this?
Yes, do.
So here we see it on the wallpaper of General Idea, and it's several inches apart. And can you go back? To the
previous
image, yeah, the image of the work.
Oh, the other one, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it was actually about the time before you guys came over to my studio visit that I decided this doesn't make sense having the space between them. And I did work with them side by side, and at that point I decided no, they needed to be together. And we see some connections with fluid moving through from one side to another. And I don't remember which side is which anymore. So I felt it was really essential to bring them together. And one of the things I like is they were further apart. They came closer and closer and closer until you guys came. And I would, early on, I had learned that the blood works as a resist to pigment. And so I would do a body print. I would rub powdered pigment into the surface and then wash the blood away. And that would leave this negative imprint. So if we see, I don't know if you could see that line, or that makes this edge right here against this dark black was a body print, and then washed away. And then I would go back into it with blood and urine. As the paintings got bigger, I had to be really careful about my use of blood because I could only have a pint drawn a month. And so I discovered that cornstarch, if I cooked cornstarch up and put that on my body, that would make a mark. It was actually a nicer mark, actually. And so that's how it would start at work. And then one of the things I also really like is the difference between the blood and the urine. The urine there's liquidity there. You see the liquidity, and which is traveling through the piece, all this orange. And I learned that, and I would lay on the work. There were earlier pieces where I just pee on it, but I would lay on it, and the fluid would travel around my body. And I got to know my floor very intimately. And I would move canvases around so that it would move the urine. I also learned that early morning pee was the best. that it would, when it evaporated, it would leave this oily residue. And so I would then dust it with pigment. And so we see all this kind of puddling is where the urine puddled and held onto the pigment. And in this piece, I used copper powder. So we start to see it oxidizing here. And in some cases, I would actually tent a work with plastic and put bowls of ammonia. Is it ammonia? Yeah, ammonia, and that would accelerate the oxidation of the copper.
Yeah, these were really, I remember when we were in your studio with my former colleague Sabrina, and she called you a mad scientist. It's just like your sort of chemistry experiments through art.
I appreciate that. Can we go back to
which one?
Vigil Strange? Right there.
This one?
Yeah. We're kind of going back a little bit between the Iron Crosses and the painting that you guys own. These are on hollow core door, and they range from about 36 inches, or about 36 inches width, and various heights. And in this work, I was naming them after titles of Walt Whitman poems or texts from Walt Whitman poems, particularly the poems that he wrote while he was a nurse during the Civil War. Can I read one of the poems?
Yeah. Is this it?
So this one right here is named after Vigil Strange. Vigil Strange I kept on the field one night when you, my son, and my comrade dropped at my side that day. One look I gave, which your dear eyes returned with a look I shall never forget. One touch of your hand to mine, oh boy, reached up as you lay on the ground. Then onward I sped into the battle, the even contested battle, till late at night relived to the place at last again I made my way. Found you in death, so cold, dear comrade. Found your body, son of responding kisses, never again on earth responding. Bared your face in the starlight, curious the scene, cool blue the moderate night wind. Long there and then in vigil I stood, dimly around me the battlefield spreading. Vigil wondrous and vigil sweet, there in the fragrant silent night, but not a tear fell, not even a long-drawn sigh. Long, long I gazed. Then on the earth, partially reclining, sat by your side, leaning my chin in my hands, passing sweet hours, immortal and mystic hours with you, dearest comrade. Not a tear, not a word. Vigil of silence, love, and death. Vigil for you, my son, and my soldier. As onward silently, stars aloft, eastward, new ones upward stole. Vigil finally for you, brave boy. I could not save you. Swift was your death. I faithfully loved you and cared for you living. I think we shall surely meet again. Till, at latest lingering of the night, indeed, just as the dawn appeared, my comrade, I wrapped in his body, in his blanket, enveloped well his form, folded the blanket well, tucking it carefully overhead and carefully under feet. And there and then, and bathed by the rising sun, my son, in his grave, in his rude dug grave, I deposited, ending my vigil strange with that vigil of night and battlefield. Vigil for boy of responding kisses, never again on earth responding. Vigil for comrade swiftly slain. Vigil I never forget how as day brightened. I rose from the chill ground and folded my soldier well in his blanket and buried him where he fell. Those poems were really significant to me. And not only that was, Marsden Hartley had a relationship with Walt Whitman. They corresponded, so there is a connection there.
I thought as a way of wrapping up our kind of conversation and opening up it to the folks here, we could talk about what sort of kind of brought our two interests together. And a painting I'm glad to hear was interesting to you, being near and dear to my heart. So, I mean, my field in art history is more 19th century military art. And so actually, you know, I've spent years of my life kind of looking at this painting here on the left, The Shower in the Barracks, by the French artist Eugène Chapron. But I just wanted to hear from you, seeing it, you know, for the first time maybe a few weeks ago, what your thoughts of it were.
I thought it was hilarious because I couldn't tell the point of view of the maker. And it made me think about how I read these images that might be queer, might not be. Is the maker queer? Where does that narrative come from? And some of the things that I thought were remarkable was this idea of privacy. Like here we've got the men in front of a window,
Yeah.
totally naked, while the dressing room is cordoned off, and so there's privacy there, but there's absolutely no privacy here, which I like. And that I was thinking of the force that's coming out of this hose must have been really strong for it to travel this distance. And also thinking about what that felt like. What was it? What did it feel like to be shot with this hose? And then we've got all these voyeurs looking on, and it felt, in the relationship between the people observing, it felt like a sex club where where a gathering of people are watching this activity, and it made me wonder, think more about masculinity and war and these kind of homosocial situations, which allow for these intimate exchanges between men that maybe would not have occurred. But it also made me start to think about bathing. And I was surprised at how many paintings there are out there about these men bathing and this homosocial experience naked. And one of the reasons why I brought this Cadmus out was that it's clearly this point of view of a gay man where these exchanges are eroticized. Like, I love this man putting on the deodorant and this person reaching over for the towel. And there's all this bodily intimacy. And then, of course, I was thinking of Demuth and his sauna paintings.
I think your discussion of this painting actually kind of point for point encapsulated my first, sort of experience and the kind of, I don't know, sort of analytic journey I was taking with this painting too. Of, at first, of course, I saw the watering hose and I was like, what is going on? And then, as you mentioned, the kind of gazes of 9 different figures are all sort of being triangulated on sort of the target of that hose, which is the sort of lower abdomen of this naked soldier who had been about 20 years old, and the ways that then even the building and the painting all kind of box the soldiers in with the grill that they're standing on, and how it frames their experience. But I think even a connection as you were talking that I was making in my head was that these relationships, these new sort of types of relationships between men are orchestrated around fluids and fluid exchange. And so we're seeing particularly water and steam, but in the period, there was also a lot of talk and concerns around alcohol and around sex between soldiers and sex workers. So those were those concerns, those discussions were, as I was discovering, just very, just below the surface of a painting like this. Because you said you thought it was hilarious, and critics were all sort of like, "Is this a joke?" Like, yeah. So people in the 19th century also thought it was kind of funny.
Yeah, that they're in this situation that's not clearly erotic, but
yeah.
And the fact that I don't know what's this position of the man holding the hose?
He would have been a non-commissioned officer, so would have been just kind of like 1 step or 2 steps above the privates.
And he's holding it close to his groin.
I know, yeah. I have a paragraph about that. At a conference, there was this, tweed jacket wearing German scholar who was like, I just don't think in the 19th century they would have read it that way. So then I went on a deep dive of 19th century imagery and discovered they were dirty people. They were sick people. Yes. So they absolutely would have been like, yeah.
And before we end, I do want to talk about our current government, and I'm totally panicked because I feel like I'm reliving the 80s again, but it's worse, and they're going after communities and criminalizing people for doing things in private, and the monitoring of pregnant women to see if they're carrying through their babies. Women who are miscarrying who can't get treatment because doctors are worried about performing an abortion, and women's lives are at risk. And the attack on trans people. Like, I don't know what the fuck people are so upset about. Vance, in that horrific speech that he gave at the Munich conference on something or other, what was the whole, do you know what I'm talking about? He refers to this, I think it's Sweden. I took a note. I can't remember what country it is, and I'm too nervous to look at the notes. There was this a law saying that there couldn't be any, similar to the States, that there couldn't be any protests against abortion, pro-lifers, within 200 feet of a clinic. And Vance is saying that there was somebody who had charges brought up against him for praying at home. And so I was thinking, well, how then are you like criminalizing trans people, queer people, when they're also in private? These contradictions I find really upsetting.
Yeah. think that could be a spot to sort of open up
Okay.
the conversation and thinking about art and engaging with our sort of, the works we were considering were kind of from the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, engaging with a very particularly charged political moment, but we're also, in another one. So it would be a great time to sort of see what questions you all have. And for the purposes of video recording, I might awkwardly repeat your question. So that's, make sure I get it right when I repeat it. So if people have questions. Oh, yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Were you involved with ACT UP before you tested positive?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So the
Yes.
question was, were you involved in ACT UP before you tested positive?
Yes. So I was already within a community. I was very much aware of what was happening medically. So I knew that I wasn't going to die. And that's another thing I would like to talk about is the difference between COVID and AIDS. There was a community response and a medical response to the epidemic, and whereas there wasn't that response during the AIDS epidemic, and people were scapegoated. And it allowed for a lot of violent rhetoric and violence. People would often wear a whistle around their neck. A whistle around their neck to draw attention if they were about to be fag bashed. And that lanyard around their neck had to be something that could be broken easily so they can't choke you. And we see this similar kind of stigma that's happening around communities that our government is attacking now, and allowing for this violence and this hatred to be expressed.
Thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. And Sean, thank you for your excellent questions. One of the leitmotifs that I saw running through your presentation was the notion of history. And I'm thinking particularly of your reference to Hartley in your paintings. I love the way in which you invoked the work of Walt Whitman. It was so interesting to be reminded that Hartley corresponded with Walt Whitman, which is kind of amazing. Another artist who actually comes to mind, who didn't figure into your remarks, but may or may not be relevant, is Robert Indiana, who of course also referenced Hartley in his work. But I wondered if you could speak a little bit about why history matters to you. I find it very exciting in the year 2025 to be reminded of what was happening in the 80s and 1982. That was a pretty phenomenal clip that you played for us. And yet I think maybe there's also something empowering about looking back at people who found strength and strategies for persevering at other very difficult historical moments. But I just wondered if you could speak a little bit about your use of Hartley, your reverence for Whitman, and why history matters, perhaps particularly at times like these. So thank you.
Yeah. Well, as you said, you made a connection between what's happening now politically and in the past. And I feel it's my responsibility to know the past, because we learn from what people have done in the past. And I also love art history, and also to think about like the environment that people made their work. Can we go to the one with Carolee Schneemann?
Yes. Which direction is that?
I think it's to the right. No, to the left.
To the left.
Oh, did it? There.
This one?
Yeah. And at the time, too, I was looking at a lot of artists as sources, as a way to, not necessarily to validate what I'm doing, but to learn how other people had expressed these ideas of otherness. And And I was looking at a lot at Carolee Schneemann and her performance work and using her body in making the mark. And the INR on the left is an earlier piece from 1997. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you very much.
There's a question there.
Thank you so much for this talk. Like, I think I'm really like interested in how you've used abstraction as like the form of like language in your art to convey like queerness and sexuality. And I've taken a look at your most recent works, and I've seen this like sort of shift to more explicit queer sexual scenes. I'm wondering what about this visual medium provides a better method or like way into accessing what you're trying to say versus abstraction, and what explains this shift? And is it more relevant now, do you find, or like just like open up the space for you to talk about that? Because I'm really interested in that.
Thank you, because I love materials. I like working with materials, developing a relationship with them in a similar way of learning how the blood would resist pigment, learning about how morning pee was better than late day pee, and things like that. And I've always been, my work has always shifted and experimented with different kinds of materials. And perhaps we can go to one of the blankets.
Yeah, that one.
Oh, wait, no, go to Wet and Sloppy Hole.
Which one is?
That one.
Oh, this one?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, Wet and Juicy Hole to work out is made in a similar way that I would apply the pigment to the body fluid works, where I would apply the pigment with just turpentine on this heavily gessoed canvas. And this came about when I was tired of rolling around on hard floors. To be quite frank, it was a drag. And then also being in situations, for instance, I was doing a visiting teaching gig at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and I had a studio and a suite of 5 faculty studios. And there was a common phone and a sink, and it was a Saturday, and no one was around. And so I'm working naked, covered in my blood and piss, naturally. And I go out to use the phone, and I was ordering materials or something. I don't remember what I was doing. But I got off the phone, and I went back to the door, and it was locked. And I was petrified because I'm at the buckle of the Bible Belt. I couldn't call security, and I didn't know what to do. And I searched around in the common area for something to cover myself with, and there was bubble wrap, but it was only like this wide, and it didn't really do much. And then there was this giant roll of tar paper. So I ripped a big sheet of that up and rolled it around my body. And it was like walking in a barrel. And I had to walk by these architecture students whom I hadn't yet met. And I was like, they don't exist, they don't exist. And I'm looking for a student to help me out. And I find her in her studio, and she's like, what's going on? I'm like, I'm locked out. And she just sat there and laughed. And I said, I need some help. So then we go back to the faculty studios. And as we're walking, we collect all of these students are following us, and it was shortly shortly after my public what?
They thought it was performance art.
Yeah, well, they thought I was just chilling out. I had a public lecture shortly before this event, and so everybody knew how I did what I do, and soon enough, I had this gaggle of students around me asking me questions about my lecture, drawing on the tar paper. And I was like, honey, I'm a little distracted. They're like, why? I was like, I'm locked out. And they thought it was the funniest thing. And then the student that I initially found says, oh, we'll call, is it 411 now? To find information? Does anyone remember 411? It was a number that you would call to get someone's phone number. So she called this man Whitney Leland, and I adored Whitney. He was always in the studio. I would try to keep my door open as much as possible to let students come in and have access to my studio and talk. And whenever I saw him coming out of his studio with his cigar, I knew we were going to be a while in my studio. And he had one of those, I don't know what you call the condition, but he'll be looking this way, but he'd be looking at Sean. And Mel gets on the phone with him, and they start talking about music, like Guided by Voices, I think they were talking about. And I was like, I was like, Mel, get to the point. And she said, oh yeah, Anthony's naked and he's locked out of his studio. And I hear, naked? Like, give me the phone. And I get the phone and Whitney's like, naked? And I was like, well, I'm wrapped in tar paper. And he's like, that's good, I'll be right down. And he came by and let me in. He couldn't look at me in the face because he was laughing too hard and says, I had no idea we hired a performance artist. But to further get back to your question, can you go to the blanket maybe?
Yeah.
So go to ASPEG, please. So I began making those graphic text paintings, and I was spending a lot of time on great gay cuisine science, and I started collecting these images, and I would recognize this similarity where there'd be a head down, head up, like these different kind of positions, and I thought, oh, this would make an interesting like animation, and so I collected these and made this kind of like digital flip book. And I was like, wow, well, there's other ways that I could use these images. And so can we go to one of the blankets?
Yeah.
And so I started to work with these images. I would collage them and then excavate the blanket, the surface of the packing blanket to expose the stuffing. And one of the things I really appreciate about this material is that it's also protective. It would wrap around a piece of furniture or something that you wanted to protect. It's also absorbent for those kinds of moments where things get wet. And also like just to be in your face, just to like be disruptive, to fuck with the surface.
What I think is really interesting about a work like this, and kind of to your question about the you're kind of turning more towards figural imagery from abstraction, is it actually takes you a minute to looking at this to sort of be able to piece apart what's happening. Especially, I mean, we have the image on the screen, which is kind of flattening it out more, but when you see the actual packing blankets, the material even kind of delays your kind of comprehension of what the scene is. So I think there is that interesting, kind of like your abstract works, where you have this sort of journey through understanding what the work is about that, you know, isn't just sort of right all there for you kind of at a glance.
And the journey too to develop a relationship with the materials. Could you go to one of the cardboard pieces, like the horizontal one?
This one?
Again, to address your question about materials, I started working with corrugated cardboard because I was absolutely broke. And this happens like probably after the first year into the COVID pandemic, and there's boxes everywhere. And I was like, oh. And so I started to collect them. And my first piece was on cardboard that was just one layer of corrugation. But then I started to pick up double layered corrugation. And in these images, I'm also using images of the body. And in this case, they're CT scans of my body. And I would play with the different layers. And in this one, I've used two different layers. And so there's one layer that's clearly represents my spine, and another that's kind of further behind the spine. Again, kind of abstracting it and making it more difficult to read. I really enjoy getting somebody engaged and then wham, like things change once they begin to understand what's happening. So this was really, really complicated to make, being that there are these two images that were overlaid onto each other, and it was, I felt like I was navigating this really tight area of islands, and it was really labor intensive, similarly to the blankets, using a little pair of scissors. Mm-hmm.
Was it exact enough? Or like
Yeah, I had X-Acto knife. My finger could go like this.
early this semester.
Say that
I
again?
tried to do something like this early in the semester too, but
And how did that go?
very tedious.
Tedious, yeah. I call it labor intensive. But yeah, it was tedious.
Well, we want to be conscious of folks' time, but I want to see maybe if there is one more question. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh.
Thank you so much, Anthony. I was just curious, I know you talked a lot about being interested in fluids. I was wondering and how you got to like the idea of blood and how that relates to kind of your it being HIV positive and HIV negative. I was curious how you got interested in also adding urine to that, just because, and I talked with Sean about this when we were talking about how to store your piece, in that like, it reminded me of a piece done in Houston, which was actually for basically trans activism, where they had 1,000 participants pee and then put that in a glass box, and basically the message was, you know, that all of our urine is the same. And it really reminded me of like how we're dealing with kind of this same attack on certain rights and everything now. But anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying, how did you get interested in that? And did you ever consider using other bodily materials like sweat or like spit or like, I don't know, tears? Hopefully you didn't have that many. But.
Well, there was a lot of tears, but they didn't make it into the work, literally. I just peed on a painting. I don't really, it was just like some morning that I had to pee me, and I just peed on it. And it was one of the hollow core doors, so it was leaning against the wall. And it wasn't something that I consciously decided to do. It just happened. And that's one of the things I really like about exploring materials. I'm a total material queen. I love playing with different kinds of materials and seeing what happens. So that's how it came about. And then I also learned that like morning pee is better because there's this more fatty material in it.
Well, we're going to end on pee.
This gentleman had a question. This gentleman had a question.
Yeah.
I'll just a quick comment about the diptychs, because this and it is actually about pee. It was so like reminiscent to me of some of the kind of testing that I have to do like via like telehealth, like for instance for PrEP.
Yeah.
Like we're increasingly asked to give like our kind of substances via the mail, and like kind of like put our blood down in like increasingly like aesthetic ways, like have to make like a perfect circle like 5 times like with my blood. And actually like you're supposed to when you give your urine sample, it's supposed to be the first pee of the morning, because that's when they're actually going to catch like the STIs that they're testing for. So I didn't actually have a question about it, but I just thought it was actually like very evocative in the ways that we might like be increasingly also kind of in touch with our kind of bodily fluids.
And you bring up something also I think is really, really significant to the history of the epidemic is PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis. So this was they would take a drug combination once a day to prevent infection. And then there's also what is it called when you take it after a risk? Post-exposure, yeah. This really changed the face of the epidemic. And it's really, one of the things that's really upsetting me right now is fucking Trump cutting all these health programs. I mean, he's cut presidential, I can't remember the whole, yes, which brings money to areas of the world that need money for education and for HIV medication. But we also see it here in the United States. Tennessee gave back money to the CDC that was earmarked for HIV education and prevention. And you know, we're seeing now the growth of measles, of other infectious diseases that could have been prevented from vaccines.
Thank you all for sitting with us and talking with us about these issues and about Anthony Viti's work. And join me in thanking Anthony once again.
Thank you. Thank you.